Today, we're going to trace psychology all the way back to its beginning. And no, we're not starting in a lab. We're starting in the minds of some of history's greatest thinkers, exploring the philosophical roots of the science that's all about, well, us.
I mean, it's a huge question, right? What's really driving your thoughts, your feelings, your actions? We're still chipping away at it with modern science, but the search for those answers, that started thousands of years ago. Because way before we had brain scans and clinical trials, this exact same question was at the very heart of philosophy. To really get what psychology is today, you have to go back to when it was a philosophical quest. So let's dive in.
Okay, so what is psychology? I mean, really. Today we'd say it's the scientific study of behavior and mental processes, but its original meaning? Well, it was a lot more abstract, and you could say a lot more profound.
The word psychology itself actually gives us a massive clue about where it came from. It's smashed together from two Greek words, psyche, which means soul or spirit, and logos, meaning study. So from the very beginning, psychology was literally the study of the soul. And this fascination with our inner world wasn't just happening in one place. Let's take a look at how the first great debates about the mind kicked off, with wisdom from all across the ancient world. In ancient India, for instance, scriptures like the Vedas were already exploring ideas about consciousness and the self. Over in China, Confucian philosophy was all about morality and how our social ties shape who we are. And in ancient Greece, you had the physician Hippocrates with one of the first biological theories, the idea that our personality was linked to our bodily fluids, or humors, kind of a first draft of linking mind to biology.
But the debate that would truly shape Western thought for centuries, well, it really catches fire with this guy, the Greek philosopher Plato. He started asking one of the biggest questions of all. Where does our knowledge actually come from? Plato's answer was that knowledge is innate. He believed we're born with certain ideas and abilities already baked into our minds, maybe left over from a past life. You can kind of think of it like being born with the software already pre-installed.
And then came Plato's most famous student who offered a powerful counterargument that pretty much changed everything, Aristotle.
Aristotle believed the exact opposite. He argued that our mind is shaped by learning, by our sensory experiences of the world. For him, knowledge isn't something we're born with. It's something we build from the world around us after we're born.
And right there, you see it. It's the first great debate in psychology, and one we are still having today. Nature versus nurture. You've got Plato on one side with inborn abilities, and Aristotle on the other with learned behaviors. This single conflict set the stage for more than 2,000 years of questions.
So after a while, these ideas kind of simmered down. But then the whole conversation about the mind just reawakens and gets totally transformed during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance.
This timeline here gives us a quick roadmap. You can see the ideas from Plato and Aristotle way back in 400 BC, getting picked up centuries later by thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, and then radically reimagined by philosophers like René Descartes and John Locke.
So during the Middle Ages, the mind was almost always seen through a religious filter. A scholar named Thomas Aquinas, for example, blended Aristotle's ideas with theology, arguing that the intellectual part of our mind was our divine connection to God.
Then we get a huge leap forward from the French philosopher René Descartes. He proposed something called Cartesian dualism, this idea that the mind and the body are two totally separate things, but they interact. And crucially, he said the brain was the bridge between them. That was a major step toward a biological basis for our behavior.
But that old debate, it was still raging. Echoing Aristotle's side of the argument, the British philosopher John Locke offered up a simple but incredibly powerful idea, and it's summed up in these two famous words, tabula rasa.
Tabula rasa is just Latin for blank slate. Locke believed that when we're born, our mind is like an empty canvas, and all of our knowledge gets painted on it by our senses and our experiences. This idea, called empiricism, was a real game changer because it suggested that the mind could actually be studied just by carefully observing the world.
That very idea, that we can understand the mind through observation, that's what paved the way for the final leap. This is the dawn of experimentation, that incredible moment when we first started trying to actually measure the mind.
So now we're in the 19th century, and that old philosophical quest starts to look a lot more like a science. A new field pops up, led by German scientists called psychophysicists. Their whole mission was to study the relationship between physical things, like a flash of light or a sound, and our personal, subjective experience of them.
So how on earth do you measure a mental process? Well, a guy named Gustav Fechner broke it down with a simple, brilliant experiment. First, something happens in the outside world. Then your brain and nerves react. He called that inner psychophysics. Finally, the time it takes you to physically respond, like by pressing a button, is measured. That's outer psychophysics. And just like that, for the very first time, a mental process could have a number attached to it. And at the same time, another scientific giant was changing absolutely everything. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution didn't just apply to things like beaks and fins. It suggested our emotions and our mental abilities were also shaped by natural selection, bringing the nature side of that old debate roaring back with the full power of biology behind it.
So let's pull all this together. We've just traced this incredible journey of an idea, all the way from ancient speculation about the soul to the very edge of a new, measurable science.
This slide really captures the whole story. What started thousands of years ago as the study of the soul, something based on speculation and reason, had finally evolved into the science of the mind, grounded in actual experimentation and observation.
You know, the deep questions really haven't changed since Plato and Aristotle. We still want to know what makes us who we are. But the tools we have to find the answers have been completely transformed, setting the stage for the birth of modern psychology. And that leaves us with one final, pretty exciting thought. What are we going to discover next?